Nik Bandak on the show. He's the president and owner of Bandak Project Management. Nik began his career in 2008 during the Great Recession, working for a concrete subcontractor in the Bay Area, and later moved to Middle East, where he worked for Bechtel. I'm probably going to talk about the concrete stuff today because my brother's in concrete. In 2011, he joined a San Diego-based commercial real estate firm where he completed over 2 million square feet of projects ranging in size, industry, and complexity. His resume of completed projects includes multifamily, transitional housing facilities, ground-up medical office buildings, high-end law firms, electrical manufacturing. The list goes on and on. He's been a valuable partner to companies as they organize their goals for growth and assess their needs in navigating the intricate entitlement process. BPM is differentiated by a relentless drive to deliver the most successful outcomes while aligning their capabilities to the client's goals to create lasting positive impact. This guy's like a project management pro. We were talking before the show here about project management and how I can guarantee he's probably way better at it than we are. He's managing huge projects. Nik, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, dude, I'm excited to have you on today. So, dude, I was reading some of the articles that you were featured in, and man, you're managing some huge stuff, and your business is only 4 years old. So you obviously had this extensive background in construction before kind of jumping in. You've experienced some tremendous amount of success in the construction industry, which we'll get into in just a sec. So I'm really anxious to ask you about the project management thing because there's so many things going on, especially in the real estate world with the supply chain and inflation cost, and just real estate's been kind of like a volatile roller coaster right now. And project management is at the pinnacle of that. Nothing matters more in the real estate world right now than getting your project done on time and on budget. So I know that we're going to have a lot to talk about. For those that don't know you, though, can you give us a little bit of background and tell your story on how you got to be doing what you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for the introduction. You made me sound very cool. I'll have to have my kids listen to it later on. But the story goes back, I would say, back to the recession. I graduated from St. Mary's College in the Bay with a finance degree, and that was a tough time to have a finance degree. So I became a field laborer, carpenter, project manager, estimator. So that was essentially my business school or MBA coming right out of school, and worked on some pretty interesting projects in the Bay, and then went over to the Middle East. I think, talking about the progression from being boots on the ground and reading plans and understanding how you execute, and then moving over to the Gulf and seeing mega projects that were going on was complicated, but it was also incredibly valuable for a young guy that was going through the trades. Came back. Was newly engaged to my wife and started working commercial real estate. And that gave me the access to the real estate side of any type of construction project. So think about, I want to lease a space. How do you navigate a lease or a work letter? I want to buy land or buy a building, the purchase and sale agreement and the due diligence that goes with that. Really got a front row seat with some thought leaders. Some were small projects and some were, million square foot developments that were cutting edge at the end of the day. When I started the company, and I think that's what I don't want to say sets me apart, but really makes me more of that 2 feet in entrepreneur. It was the pandemic had started, had completed in my career quite a bit of life science, technology, manufacturing plants. And, I was working quite a bit like everybody else, but also navigating this really complicated time. You weren't allowed to go outside, and you had to learn an entirely new way to communicate personally, professionally. My wife and I are very blessed to have 3 young kids, but at the time we had our twin boys were 2 years old. And I just was working really hard. And I'd say that one of the silver linings of the pandemic was people started to prioritize life and health. And I did just that. So June 1st, with I would say the support of my wife, first and foremost, got to give her a shout out. I started Bandak Project Management, and very quickly, 1 project turned into 5 into 10. We hired our first employee in January of 2021. And we were focused at that time mainly on science and technology projects. That was essentially the craze in Southern California. So if you took a COVID testing kit during that time, we were building the clean room manufacturing sites. We were building the labs. We were building lab space that was going to be prepared for a R&D company to come in and, research COVID or, develop the new drug, life-saving drug that was going to save a bunch of people. So here we are nearly 4 years later, and we're, full-time staff running projects across different industry types and loving every second.
Yeah, when I saw the numbers of what you guys are developing, my eyes like kind of popped out because, like we're over here in Tennessee, building these, entry level spec homes, rows, and I might do like, $20 million of development a year, and you're managing like, oh my God, was it like it's in the hundreds of millions, right? Well, what's that number?
Yeah, no, it's up there. And I think what I go back to is, small projects, big problems, big projects, big problems. So, it's perspective, it's relative. I think at the end of the day, what we really try to focus on is the client, right? People do business with people, not oftentimes just with a firm. So some of the projects we're working on, and just like you're saying, it might be 20 million a year, but that 20 million is incredibly impactful and the returns are great project, great deal for us. At scale, we're able to cover quite a bit of territory. So we've crossed over the $1 billion mark in terms of projects that we're supporting, leading, managing. And the future, I would say, is growth, but strategic growth that I would say is controlled.
Yeah, we got to get into that because billion's a big, big number. And
Number.
I see what goes into managing what we've got. And, because we're both in the construction space, we're single family. You guys are, it looks like commercial. And I can't even wrap my head around it. So I want to jump into like how you grew your business to that, because I'm sure there's a lot of people listening would love to understand how to get to that $1 billion mark. So when you were first starting out, you obviously had a background in this specific industry. That's tremendous. What does the beginning stages look like, right? Let's start with like that first year. What did your business look like? What kind of projects were you bidding? I know your resume here says you started out like as a solo guy. Like, who were the first few hires? And I got some questions on like project management kind of later. We'll get into that. But like, what did that look like? How did you take the first steps here in that first year?
Brandon, that's a great question. Going back in the memory bank here, the first steps I think for me was foundation. That's the word that comes to me, right? Is all right, what are the fundamentals that I'm going to do better than anybody? And I need to be able to do those very efficiently and very quickly. So I would say that any entrepreneur that's starting out a new company, really have your foundation in place. And I'm talking about nitty-gritty stuff, right? Like your invoice template. If you don't have a means to get paid, you have a problem, right? You really need to make that very simple to execute the documentation. For us, schedules and budget templates, meeting minutes. I would say the theme there, though, is that I didn't have to go and rely on creating that foundation. I jumped on it immediately, so I knew I could pull the arrow out of my quiver and execute very quickly for a client. The next thing I would say for me that I was focused on was really the story and the sales pitch, making sure people knew exactly what I was doing, what I was offering, and the value. And then last is surrounding yourself with an unbelievable and very loyal and honest support group. So I'm sure you have that, Brandon, but if it's your lawyer or your accountant or a significant other or a friend, make sure you have somebody that can give you very unfiltered, very honest feedback, because for me, that was incredibly beneficial in the industry while we were navigating these projects that were very complicated. And every day there was something new that was coming up. And I felt confident I could handle that, but then the nuts and bolts to operate the company and be able to understand how taxes work, to understand the legalities of our contracts, I really needed that support system. So those first, let's say, not even year, but 3-4 months was a lot of time, oftentimes very late at night, researching it, asking really good questions, and then thinking about the unasked question. And what I mean by that is figuring out, what am I not asking? Because that could either leave me exposed or it could make me stronger when I'm going out and doing what I need to do as a practitioner.
When you started, did you already have a portfolio of like customers that you could immediately start bidding on? Did you have to go find them? And if you didn't, like how did you go about finding your customers? And I think one thing that a lot of people struggle when they start their business is establishing credibility.
Yeah.
And even down the road, getting from one
Mm.
tranche to another, you might have an extensive construction background doing, single family residential. But if I go try to do what you do, all of a sudden the customers want to go, well, have you built a hospital? Have
Yeah.
you built a tech center? And it's like, well, no, I haven't. And so that can be a pretty big roadblock. How did you overcome that?
Yeah, the credibility for us, I would say the brand for me as a solopreneur at that time was that I knew how to build labs, or I knew how to build corporate office space, and there was a lot of that going on. So I was fortunate in that regard. But you're right, being able to walk into, let's say, a healthcare institution or somebody that's in a different industry type than what we're known for, you really had to do that research, and the credibility was something that we've had to work at every single day. And if it wasn't about, can you build this? It was, well, your company is young. I don't know if you can do this. And so it was a bit of an apples and oranges comparison sometimes, and you have to be prepared to speak authentically about that. The ability though to scale is unique, I think, to any modality. And for me, I've poured my heart into this. And I've been focused on the fact that this isn't, chapter 2 of a 10 chapter book. This is the second half of my life. And I'm really focused on doing things right and not putting band-aids on a bleeding wound that I can deal with later. It's not that I'm trying to be perfect, but I would say the credibility oftentimes comes with the trust that they're better off with you than without you. And knowing that you have the network, like I said before, that support has allowed us to diversify as long as it's not too big of a jump. Truth be told, I'm not the person that's going to go build your single family home. It's, in my opinion, that's harder than building a lab space. But going from, life science and R&D space to an IVF or IVI clinic actually is a lot of the same questions and a lot of the same process. You have to be mindful about the differences, but knowing that you know how to manage the budget, manage the schedule, I think that goes back to the practitioner side. But truly being authentic and building off of the foundations that you started with, that helps you to get that credibility. And then last, I would say is don't be afraid to be almost overly competitive if you know there's an opportunity. So for us, we knew that at some point, and we've seen it, the life science market or let's say that the science industry in general was going to slow down because it was just, Brandon, man, it was red, orange hot. And we knew that whether it was on the capital side, the investment side, or just the flat out, it was going to slow down. We knew that something was going to slow down. So we started diversifying away. And not saying away like we don't do it. We still do a significant amount of that type of work, but we started growing with the intent to diversify our revenue stream. And when we did that, we started going towards healthcare and other modalities that weren't that big of a jump for us.
Okay. So it sounds like you made the right decision. You kind of saw the writing on the wall, diversified away into some other industries
Yeah.
that you probably saw some opportunity on the horizon. What were some of the things, and I know you just named a couple of them, but what did you do to stand out over your competition in those initial stages when you were trying to scale and just win your first few customers?
Oh boy. Now you're getting into the $1 million question here. I feel like, I think subject matter expertise, and the ability to show them that we've delivered projects successfully. But I think coming to the table and saying, I'm not going to sell you and then leave. I'm very proactive. So I think that's, if you're in the service industry, being able to stand there and say very confidently and then follow through with it that I am going to do what I say I'm going to do. That was to the emotional side. On the technical side, we went through a new website. We really went through new branding. We wanted to make sure that when we went from just me as being in the company to having one person and then scaling with people, I wanted to scale with the right people, which is a whole different topic and conversation. but then
Mhm.
I wanted the visuals, right? I wanted to make sure that people knew it wasn't just me, that they knew that when we threw these data points out, it wasn't me self-promoting myself with my name on the door, calling the company Bandak Project Management. It's because, that seemed logical to me at the time, and I wanted to be authentic about it. But being able to prop my team up and say they too can do it has helped us to spread that expertise across and then grow in terms of quantity and volume. So I think don't be so focused. If I could give any entrepreneur, at least in the service industry, some advice, you almost don't need to be so focused on it being you doing everything. You really do need to learn to delegate, but spend the time on your people and teaching them how things should be done. And if they stumble, then pick them up and keep moving forward.
Did you go win jobs first and then start hiring people, or did you hire the team in anticipation of knowing what was going to happen?
Uh, the projects were won, so we had them. So I would say essentially the revenue was booked, let's call it. And then I started bringing people on. And mainly because it happened so quickly. I mean, we went from, or I should say, I went from, managing, let's say like 50 to 150 million dollars in work, depending on where it was in the cycle, to managing 400 million within a year. And you can't do that by yourself. So it happened very quickly. And I would say the need for good people was there because the work was there.
Okay. So you went out, created the problem first, and then solved it with the right people.
Yeah.
Very smart. What did the next leg look like? So you go out, you've won these jobs, and boom, you obviously know the right team to build because you came from that background, you had that experience. And so you're plugging your team into this. They're out, they're working, they're going to job. What did the next stage of scaling your business look like? And what did the projects you were working on look like in order of, was it a hospital? What was the dollar
Mhm.
amount?
Yeah, speaking to that, I would say, and almost if I can, I started prioritizing time, right? And I'm looking at the books that say we're very responsible when it comes to the financial health of the company, but I started looking at where was I most effective with my time. And I wanted to be client facing so that I could set the projects up, I could answer the phone if a client called, and I'm still very focused on that. So I think there becomes a point where as you start to scale your company, when it's just you, you're looking at the checks coming in and the revenue, and you're like, how do I manage this? Well, like you said, there's always somebody else who's probably better at being a controller or a CFO than I am at being a controller or CFO.
Yeah.
And certainly I would say that's, some of my project managers are probably better at being a project manager than I am. I have this experience. So I would say the tranche to get to the next level, I saw the light at the end of the tunnel of what was coming. And 2021 was the year of foundation for us. So every year I started doing this kind of nerdy thing where I have the year of something. And so that year was the year of foundation. And so we got and made sure we had the foundations of the company set in stone to be able to take that next tranche of volume that was coming at us. And for me, it was spending an immense amount of time with my project team and being a resource for them, which goes back to that time aspect. So getting there, and what we did was really spend a lot of critical time with the team and invested a lot of money into continuing education to make sure that they were certified and licensed, to make sure they had the resources they need to be able to stand in front of the clients and be credible.
Well, so tell me more about that. When you
Yeah,
say spend more time with the team, the training, you just named some of the certifications that you would invest
yeah.
in. But I mean, tell us more about that for those that are listening right now that own a business, small or medium or large. I think everybody wants to know how to get better at managing their team, right? What does that leadership look like? What do the formats look like? For the meetings, what do the one-on-ones look like? Maybe kind of break that down for us if you can.
Absolutely. I didn't just do it with my team, I did it with myself. So when I would call it like got tutors that would teach me about simple things, the balance sheet, making sure I knew what was going on there, budgeting. So just the wave of technology to really track expenses internally, but then on projects. But then with the team, we set up expectation, and it wasn't fill out this form and come and talk to me about it. It actually was different than that. It was, look, I am gonna meet with you every Monday. We had a set time. I'm gonna spend an hour with them, but the expectation was they were gonna come with three different factors, right? What is going really well on your projects? What has gone sideways? And be open with me because I could give them all sorts of issues that I'm working through. And then what have you been doing really well? Right? Or what do you need support with that is going well or that is not going well? So I was always there for them. And then the idea of this open door policy of call me into a meeting, call me into a phone call, just come and talk to me. That was continual, right? But those Monday meetings were very structured. They had those three topics. So what's going well, what's not going well, what do you need my support with? And then we had a clear the air section. Clear the air for me, and I would advise any employer with lieutenants, with teams, whatever it might be, clear the air. And they could tell me that I said something to them that really maybe didn't sit well with them very well, and it just maybe rubbed them the wrong way, able to nip it in the butt quickly. Or they would tell me that there's something going on in their personal life and I could step in and support them to make sure that they were valued. But that clear the air was 5 minutes of a very intense conversation. Sometimes it was nothing, but sometimes it was very fruitful. So we did that. And then the other piece of it is I would always attend meetings. So their project meetings, I would always be there. If a client asked them a typical question, I was always there as a backstop. But then as a leader, I believed that rather than cutting off a project manager or a team member during a call, I would take the time after the meeting to have a bit of an after action reporting with them to say, this came up and I didn't really understand what you were getting at. Was this what you were looking for? And they'd say, yeah. Well, you might want to clarify that with the client because maybe they're a little confused. So rather than, uncovering the dirty laundry during the call, I would take the time to speak with them so they could go and rise and shine. And I think that has proven to be a very effective way to get the team to not just be me, but to be everybody else going and doing their thing.
I love that three-step process, and then especially clearing the air. I try to spend the first, like, 10 minutes
Yeah.
during one-on-ones when I meet every couple of weeks with everybody. Just, how are things going in your personal life? And let's keep the lines of communication open because, yeah, the last thing you want is somebody bottling something up. Because, I mean, I hear when I come home at night from certain people that things don't go well, and I'm like,
Yeah.
God, dude, if just the business owner knew, and like nobody wants to say anything because they don't want to like rat people out or be
Yeah.
the person that squealed, or like they just don't want to be a nuisance, but something that's getting on their nerves. They don't want to share it because they don't want to be the problem. I'm like, I do, like, you don't understand. The business owners want to know this stuff. They want to know when things are not going well so they can fix it. So kudos to you for being able
Yeah.
to air that out. That's huge.
Yeah, I will add, Brandon, everybody's human. And if you hire the right people, which is, it's subjective within your own organization, you have to understand, and this is especially true throughout the pandemic, the industry, people were experiencing such significant trials and tribulations, and it was really causing people to think differently. And that's a process. So you can't, and in my opinion, it's very difficult to just separate your professional and personal life. At the second you click, log in on a Zoom call, that commute's not there anymore. Or it wasn't at the time. So I think being authentic and human with your team, it's okay. You want to be mindful about the HR and legalities of it, but it is okay, right? Because we're all
Yeah.
human.
Yeah. Now they appreciate the transparency and the honesty, and they
So
feel like they're talking to a person that'll keep them around a while. I'm curious. So let's get into like some of the nuts and bolts here on the project management. What does it look like managing a project of that size? I cannot imagine building a lab or a hospital or a tech center, right? A lot of single family homes, it's kind of the same, right? Maybe the outside changes and how it's framed up, but a lot of the insides and nuts and bolts until you get into like the super fancy nice stuff, it's kind of the same. So I feel like it's like a documented cookie cutter process. And I mean, let me tell you, we struggle to keep our job sites clean. When I look at those giant buildings going up downtown and the little bitty space that they have to work, I'm like, how in the world Do they manage the logistics of getting the materials there? Because a lot of times you're in the middle of these big cities, and keeping the site clean. And then you've got obviously the financial side of it, managing all the different cost codes that you have. I mean, what do you feel like is y'all's secret sauce to project management?
Oh man, I go back to frustration and focus. If something frustrates you enough, you work to fix it, and then you focus to make it, say, a more seamless, efficient process. And how we do it is back to those fundamentals and the foundation. Communication is incredibly important, and I think making sure the client understands that no one's perfect. No one project is perfect.
Uh,
Oftentimes things happen that are completely outside of your control. And then at the beginning of the project, setting expectations. Um, People will bring us on for those complicated and very technical projects. We're doing an aquarium at the moment. And, rather than it being healthcare for humans, it's almost healthcare for animals. And it's unique. And then it's an aquarium. So it's almost got this retail feel to it because you have the guest experience that's going to be
yeah.
happening as well. So there's a lot of eyes on it. And I think as project managers, and I think this probably would be applicable to any entrepreneurs and leaders out there, is really adding discipline to the process. But then also don't let the process be just stoic, right, and fixed. You have to be flexible because these things they get manipulated, they change. It's very rarely that the external and macroeconomics can be so static, right? But as project managers, we need to add discipline to the process that makes it okay, that we understand that these things might happen and we've thought about them, whether it's through a contingency or it's a known or unknown risk. We really look ahead and say, we're your best bet at being a crystal ball. We're your insurance policy. If this comes up, we've either been through it before or we've been through something very similar. So how do we do it? I would say setting up expectations early, communicating very clearly and very often is very important. And then I would say adding discipline to the process that people can confide in us that something happened, and we'll help out and make sure that we can keep this train pointed in the right direction.
But how are you bidding these massive projects? Like when we're doing a single family home, we'll
Oh
get,
gosh, yeah.
you take the architectural plans and you go and you have the construction drawings if it's that, bid out. So we're getting bids for the framing and the
Yeah.
siding and everything. And so we're kind of solidifying pricing. And, where we got hit pretty hard was the supply chain caused this severe lack of supply on a lot of materials, especially in, like, late 2022,
Oh
twenty
gosh.
twenty three. And I mean, just, prices kind of kept going up and up and up on us. And, subs were just increasing their bids. It's like, hey, dude, I can't do it for this
Yeah.
anymore. I'm sorry. And it's like, holy crap. And then at the same time, we had interest rates, going up. And so it kind of capped the appreciation on a lot of our homes. And it was like, oh, geez, it's like a reverse crash where the construction costs shoot up, not the
Yeah.
prices shoot down on you. So, like, how are you bidding these things out? Are you locking yourself into like an agreed upon price? Are you doing like
Oh
cost
gosh.
plus a certain percentage? Like, what does that look like when you're pigeonholed into, these giant projects? Because if you get it wrong, like for us, if we get it wrong, it's like, all right, cool, maybe $100,000 or something. We screwed up, for you, it might be, millions and millions of dollars.
It can be, right. The execution and procurement strategy depends on the project. I know that's a mouthful, but how I go and buy out an office space would be different than how I go and buy out a lab space. I will say that we are proponents of starting the process early. The data sets that we have is not 10 projects, it's hundreds of projects. So when we're putting together our master plan, it has that budget, it has the schedule in it, it has our execution methodology that we believe is going to work. That's our North Star. But I think your question is, how do you know how much something's going to cost, and how do you contract and protect your risk against that?
Yeah.
I would say that in one of your previous episodes, and I might butcher this, so you got to help me, but you had mentioned that um, the amount of risk on a project is almost directly attributed to the people that are around you, right? Those experts. And I can't remember exactly what you said, but I think the point is made. You really do, I would say, we start by targeting, and you really do need to make sure that you're targeting the right subject matter experts for that project, right? And we know who those right groups are, and then we know who the right teams are within the organizations to help us execute. Then what we do is we look at the economics and we understand the potential risks that are out there. We will go out and we'll contract for a guaranteed maximum price with the general contractor, and we'll, on our side, on the owner side, carry allowances and contingencies for knowns, unknowns, and then, just the off chance of something being added to the project later on. So we really go in with this plan to say, we're going to contract for this amount, but we know that these things might grow and ebb and flow. And then as the project moves across the finish line and time starts trickling away, right? The risk that you have with 1 month left to go on the project is different than the risks you have with 18 months left to go on the project. So we'll start reducing the allowances or contingency as long as it's there. And then that starts honing us in on what that final budget's going to be. And then we're monitoring every single week. I think, to your point about supply chain, I think anybody listening to this that's in the industry will understand switchgear, panel boards, anything electrical related has been a bit of the bane of everybody's existence. And we learned through trials and tribulations with, 10 minutes notice, that we were going to get hit with a 40-week delay on a project that was about a $15 million penalty. I went on eBay. I called every single person I could on the planet that I knew had any ties to electrical equipment. I ended up finding a guy not too far from us that actually built the equipment for us within 4 weeks. And the $15 million penalty became a $100,000 penalty. But we had good people around us that rolled up their sleeves and said, okay, can't be this bad. We got to figure this out. So executing is really just monitoring the risk. Should it be a hard bid project to the contractors and the subcontractors? Should it be a guaranteed maximum price? Should it be design assist, design build? Should it be integrated project delivery? There's all these different contracts and methodologies that we look at, and it all comes down to risk and the client.
So what did some of those allowances look like specifically? Like, is it like, hey guys, here, I'm just kind of speaking in my own terms, but hey,
Yeah.
if I'm bidding something, a sub might say like, hey, here's a lumber quote, labor and
Oh,
materials,
yeah.
and of course this is dependent on the materials being, lumber being this price. So in here, I'm letting you
Yeah.
know that if lumber goes up, here's the price I'm quoting right here. But if you see that price go up, and I'll notify you when it does, at the time that, that's something that I can't account for right now, 6 months in the future.
Yeah, you're right. On the multifamily, mixed use, infill projects, even sometimes retail, lumber, that's definitely a volatile commodity that we have to focus on. In the lab world, anything science and tech related, I feel like it's mechanical units, it's electrical components. So we understand, and we can make phone calls to the right subcontractors and suppliers to understand when their escalation they think it's going to hit. So we'll hedge a little bit against that. And so we'll have direct allowances lined out in our budgets. For some of our bigger, say, pharmaceutical and diagnostic clients that work internationally, we will look across a broad spectrum of potential issues. Unfortunately, 6, 7, 8 months ago, there was really this peak in the war that was going on in Ukraine and Russia, and it's unfortunately still going on. But we were looking at that as impacting supply chain for products coming out of Europe, even China. So we were able to put allowances in there, protecting against having to buy from a local provider, having to go elsewhere, but there would be a cost increase related to switching the specification. So we have to shed, I would say, all of our ego, and then we have to look at everything across the globe and say, what if, and then protect it. But again, as time rolls on, that's when we start having a little bit clearer picture about where and when we can get certain products, and then what is being specified, and then we've protected the clients, upside on the budget, I would say.
I can't imagine what y'all's contracts look like because you almost have to have every single situation figured out and like a plan A and B to it and be
Yeah.
able to properly communicate that to the customer because I mean, there's so many
Yeah.
line items and there's so many things that, I mean, we run into stuff all the time with land development and building houses that's unique and unforeseen. You guys doing because every hospital is unique. Every lab is unless it's kind of
Sure.
like a cookie cutter baby lab corp, it's unique. Can't imagine the surprises that you run into building those contracts out where it
Yeah.
outlines all the things that could potentially go wrong and what to do about it. Did that come just with your experience and working for a company that kind of did this where you kind of just take that contract and copy and paste it and you had that experience, or were there some like third party companies or resources that you use to build out these contracts and most importantly, like third set of eyeballs to look at them to make sure you didn't miss anything?
That's a good question, man. So I started in the field as a carpenter and for a subcontracting company. So we were able to, when I'm looking at the contract from a subcontractor's perspective, it's different than me as a general contractor or an owner's rep, meaning the owner itself. So I think that perspective has been helpful in assessing risk. But getting to the point where we're able to structure language, there's, a very, I won't say intense, but intensive process to make sure that general counsels are talking to each other. So there might be some legal entities involved and us really establishing almost as a fiduciary for the project, the just the assessment of risk, right? To understand that this could happen, this might not happen, but we do know in order for this project to be successful, we've done a couple things right. We've picked the right team, we've picked the right firm, we're doing everything we can to push the rock forward. So are we really trying to protect against the inevitable or sorry, anything that could happen? Or are we trying to make sure we're all together in the event something does happen and we can all fix it together? The last thing we want to have happen is people start pulling out contracts and it becomes this legal battle. We want the project finished. But we do have to be very responsible in protecting the client. That's our fiduciary, and making sure we're not just being irresponsible or blind to potential risks out there. So, yes, the contracts are lengthy. However, you have to look at the circumstance to make sure that everybody is remaining objective. And we've been fortunate enough to be partnered with clients and contractors alike that trust the process and help us to target that risk and then protect against it to make sure nothing, malicious was done or negligent.
Okay, yeah, so it just goes back
It's
to your support system. That's
it
what I
will,
was kind of
yeah,
thinking.
Brandon, it does, but you also need to be responsible, right? You as a fiduciary for your probably investors, you need to do the same for everybody on the project.
Yep, 100%. Well, dude, man, this has been a eye-opening experience in construction. I've never gotten to speak with someone managing these projects. This has been a real treat. I appreciate you coming on. For those that want to learn more about you, learn more about your services, learn about your business, where should they go?
Yeah, so our website, www.bandakpm.com. That's where you can find everything about Bandak Project Management. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no. So Bandak Project Management, we'll make sure that that is posted in the link below. This has been an absolute pleasure. Nik, thanks for coming on today.
Now, man, thank you so much, Brandon. I really appreciate your time.